Hello and welcome to the What's Up Doc podcast. I'm Jeff Booth with my co-host Calissa Pollard. Calissa,
Hi, how's it
and
going?
doing great. And we also have a wonderful guest, Lester Jones, the VP of Analytics and Chief Economist for the MBWA, which is the National Beer Wholesalers Association. Lester's got a background where he previously held the title of Chief Economist at the Beer Institute, which I think is the greatest job title ever made. He's got a background of economics from Maryland, Baltimore, and Delaware. And Lester, excited to have you on the show. What is the MBWA and why does it need a chief economist?
Oh, well, hey guys, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, we like the National Beer Wholesalers Association. It is a mouthful. We do frequently get confused with the National Women's Basketball Association, but we are not the National Women's Basketball Association. We are the National Wholesale Beer Association at National Beer Wholesalers Association. And what we do is we serve as advocates for beer distributors. And if you're familiar with the alcohol beverage industry in the United States, there are kind of separate tiers of activity, of business activity. We have brewers and importers. These are the people that make beer, import beer, market beer, do the advertising, do all the great stuff around the beverage of beer. But what they do is they actually sell their beer to beer distributors, and beer distributors buy them because we are independent beer distributors. We are not connected to the suppliers. We have a certain amount of business independence, and the focus of that business independence is actually buying beer from brewers and importers. And we take ownership of that beer, and then we are kind of responsible because we now hold lots of beer and we need to turn that back into cash. So beer distributors get out there and they sell beer, they market beer, they merchandise beer, they deliver beer, they drive it all over the place, they go into basements, they go wherever they need to go to get beer into retail. And and you need an advocate because it's alcohol, and alcohol is different. We have two amendments in the Constitution regarding alcohol. We know at different states have very different views and perspectives and policies and ideas on how alcohol should be sold and consumed. Think of going to Salt Lake City and going to New Orleans in the same week, and how your experience with alcohol would play out. Those would be the two just complete extremes on how states choose to manage and regulate alcohol and access to alcohol. So in that, you need advocates. You need advocates at the federal, state, and local level. You need advocates in health and at all the agencies, whether it's with the Health and Human Services, Department of Education, Department of Agriculture, Department of Transportation, Department of Treasury. Every agency in the federal government kind of has a little finger somewhere poking around with alcohol policy. And if you're not careful, things may happen that you don't like. So you need to be very aware of what's happening at the federal, state, and local level when it comes to alcohol and the access to alcohol, the sale of alcohol, retailing, distribution, manufacturing. The whole gamut needs to be paid attention to very carefully.
I don't think people, yeah, I don't think people have ever thought deeply enough about how the beer gets to their mouth. So right, three big buckets. You have the brewers, then the distributors, and the retailers, and those do not overlap. Can a brewer ever self-distribute?
Oh yeah. There are self-distribution options in the United States. The last time I checked, probably about 80% of all brewers have access to self-distribution. There's some states where they don't have access to it. There are other states where there's maximums and minimums and such, and channels that they can do it in. But the reality is that brewers make beer, and if you're an economist, you like the idea of specialization, people doing the things that they do best and paying people to do things for them that they don't do so well. And that's how you get the synergies and the optimizing output and the good things that come out of market economy. So when you a brewer can distribute beer. Does he want to? Sometimes they do, but distributing beer, like distributing anything else, is hard work. It's long hours on the road. It's unless it's potato chips and popcorn, it's beer, which is relatively heavy. It's heavy, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of equipment to move it around. So distributors tend to focus in on the things that they do best, which is the logistics of moving big boxes of cases and kegs and bottles and cans across the country and into all the different types of retail accounts. So remember, you can go to a stadium and you can see it's all mostly keg beer, and there's draft lines and there's lots of draft equipment to move just large volumes of beer quickly through a stadium, through a draft system. But then you go to a hotel and they just might have a couple of bottles, right? So servicing those two accounts takes a lot of logistics and a lot of planning, because you want your stadiums to have all that keg beer, but you want your hotels to have a nice selection of high-end beers too. So those are very different logistic problems that beer distributors have to solve every day.
That's a great way to break it down. Yeah, it's certainly, I think, something that people don't think about enough. And I like the way you broke it down of specializing, right? Just because you make a great beer probably doesn't mean you're very good at getting it out to all the places, and vice versa. Just because you're excellent at distribution, maybe you shouldn't be making beer. So here's an on the spot question. Calissa, what's your favorite beer or type of beer?
That's a really easy one. I love IPAs, but yeah, I'm not really able to eat them or drink them as much anymore because of gluten problems. But yeah, I love IPAs.
Well, we
So
got a
you
lot
got to
of
find.
gluten-free beers. We got lots of gluten-free beers
Yeah,
out there for you.
yeah, for sure. So that's kind of what I've adjusted to. But yeah, it's not really my favorite.
And Lester, are you allowed to have a favorite beer, or do you just have to support them all, or is there a favorite beer or type of beer that you like?
Wow. I drink a lot of different beers, and I find beers to be very good for occasions. So every occasion calls for a different beer, and those beers tend to be very different. I mean, I live down here in Austin, Texas. It's been a very hot summer. Uh, we're drinking a lot of liquid, a lot of volume, and they tend to be lower ABVs and more light lagers and more pilsners and more kolsches. But certainly, as the weather cools, we're gonna dive into some of the more better fall beers. So I treat beer with the occasion, whether it's cutting the lawn or watching a baseball game or going for a hike or sitting down for a dinner. Those all cry for different beers, and that's why when you look at beer distribution and you look at the literally the tens of thousands of variety of brands and packaging and styles and brewers, there's so much beer out there. It's hard to have just one favorite, but I do have favorites for certain occasions. Usually they're the free beers that are people giving me for free.
Yeah, I think you undersold yourself as chief economist. I think you should get into marketing with that campaign, a beer for every occasion. I think you really knocked that out of the park. I'm a lager pilsner guy myself at this point in my career, but I like a good IPA, and I'm with you. I think the right beer for the right occasion. For
Yeah.
those who aren't beer geeks, what does ABV mean?
Oh, alcohol by volume. So there's low ABV. So like a 3.5 to 4. So like a Bud Light or a Michelob Ultra or a Coors Light, those run about 4.2%, right? And when you get into your more delicious, higher, more beefy, flavorful IPAs, you're running 7, 8, sometimes 9% if you're in a double IPA. So all of a sudden, if it's a hot, and you're outside drinking beer and you're watching a game, maybe a light lager is what you want to do, a pilsner, a kolsch, a light or a light lager. But if you're hanging out at home and it's a different environment, higher ABVs from IPAs and such are good for that occasion.
So then maybe you can dispel this. I've always heard, and this is a very good distribution logistics question. I've heard that ABVs can vary by state. So, for example, the ABV in Utah for certain beer might be different than ABV in Arizona. Is that true?
It used to be true. We recently, many states, including Utah, Colorado, Oklahoma, and I believe Kansas have all kind of gotten away with what we call 3-2 beer. So coming out of Prohibition, there was this idea of 3-2 beer. It was low, very low ABV beer. And it was kind of like you could drink a lot of it and you wouldn't get, hammered from it because it's just, it's 3.2 ABW. Now, be careful. That was 3.2 beers, alcohol by weight versus alcohol by volume. Water and alcohol weigh different things. That's a whole other story, but that's brewing chemistry. We don't need to worry about it. But so they've gotten away with it. They've done away with a lot of it. I think the only state now that has low point beer, low 3.2 beer is Minnesota, and it might only be in like grocery stores. It's, there's only a very small place that it exists. Still out there. But what I find incredibly interesting is while we've gotten rid of 3.2 beer in a regulatory sense of where you can sell 3.2 beer, we've actually seen a growth in non-alcoholic beers. I'm not sure if you've heard about like Athletic Brewing Company or Heineken 0.0. All of a sudden, NA beers, these non-alcohol beers, are very popular now because they're making them more delicious and more approachable by more people. I think this is a great thing because it introduces people to more occasions to have malt-based beverages, which is what we distribute and which we like to have people drink.
Lagunitas Hoppy Refresher. I'm all about it. We support the non-alcoholic beer. Calissa, have you ever had a non-alcoholic beer?
I don't think I have actually, no, but I do see them around quite a bit.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll try one.
And it's good. And it ties real well with a lot of things I've seen on LinkedIn where like so many work and social functions are so drink related. And if you're not drinking, you feel left out, even if, you want something, and it doesn't have to be water, but you can find these great like hoppy refreshers or mocktails, cocktails without alcohol. So that way it's like, you can still enjoy that feeling of like, I'm trying fun and delicious drinks, but they don't have alcohol content. And I think it's cool that the beer distribution industry or the beverage industry is starting to think like that. And it really makes it more inclusive, and more inclusive means more customers, which means more sales.
Yeah. And logistically, we're moving trucks all over the place, right? And if the truck's not full, if we can put some non-alcs in there, we're doing good. We're being more efficient and more profitable. And that's what we want to do is fill up our trucks every day as we go out into the marketplace to make deliveries. And the more full the truck, the more deliveries, the more cases, the more money, which is what we do.
So your beer distributors will actually do or ship also non-alcoholic beers as well.
Oh yeah.
As well.
Yep.
Nice. Okay. What? Yeah. Okay.
And
good.
Calissa, I know we have here at Opendock, we have dock scheduling tool that has a fair amount of brewers. So it's fun when I look through our customer list and I start seeing like these breweries that I actively go buy beers from and get excited. But we recently went and toured a distributor here in Arizona, at least in the last 6 months. Calissa, when you saw that, kind of what were your thoughts? I know that was our first time like in a beer distribution facility. What did you think? Like what was your take, Calissa, when you saw this operation?
Yeah, I think I was fascinated at how many options there are out there. I couldn't believe just like the shelves were filled up with so many different options that like I don't see when I go to my normal grocery stores, or gas stations. So it's like, it's pretty interesting to see all the options there.
Yeah. So, and what you saw was kind of the distribution point, right? So all the beer comes into this independent beer distributor. He buys some Anheuser-Busch. He might buy some Constellation. He may buy some Coronas. He may buy some small craft guys and some importers. So all these different suppliers and importers and all these different manufacturers of product all come together there. And then you probably saw them put a pallet together, right? And he just picks, they go through all the racks, they pick everything. And then all of a sudden there's this unique palette of product that is custom designed for that retail establishment. Like I said, what you sell to a stadium, you're not going to have 100 different choices when you go to a stadium because you want big kegs, you want beer to flow fast, you want people to move fast. It's not about going to the stadium. It's not about having hundreds of beers to choose from. It's about having the right beer at the right time to move quickly through the lines and the service. But if you go to a specialty beer shop, suddenly you're going to see this just wide variety and this big selection of very unique higher end beers that are, probably more expensive and more unique. And then when you go to your grocery store, you're going to see kind of that everyday stuff you want to grab and have in your refrigerator with your milk and your eggs and your butter. So, those three, but the beer distributor brings all of that variety together and then works with the retailers to get the right combination of those products that are going to work best for those retail occasions. And that's the power of the 3-tier system and that independence, because everyone's in on this, has skin in the game, is like I say. The distributor's bought that beer. His job is to find a home for that beer, because he can't take a case of beer to the bank to pay his employees. He needs cash. So the minute he gets that case of beer, his mind is like, I gotta move this to a retailer, because that's when it gets turned into cash, so I can reinvest it in more inventory.
I'm going to have my friends listen to this podcast, because when I help do yard work or maybe move, I get paid in beer.
Uh-huh.
And so they are using beer as their currency. And I think I'm getting hosed now. But I love how you talk about distribution, because it's really analogous to what we have in our industry with the brokerage, right? You can see the fact that you listed 100, there's 100 vendors. It would be difficult for a single gas station or grocery store to procure the right amount of inventory from 100 different vendors, 100 different orders, go backs, damages. And it's like, what a great case of why there is a distributor. And that's the same explanation we have of why a truckload brokerage exists, because there's 600,000 motor carriers and it's hard to have a relationship with all of them. So it makes sense to have a body in the middle to help manage that.
Yeah. Minimizing your nodes of communication and ordering and all that stuff, and simplifying it down in a channel that is specialty, like beer or beverages. It's interesting because we did change our name to, at one point, our tagline was the National Beer Wholesalers Association. We kind of said the National Beer and Beverage Wholesaler Association. So we've actually kind of expanded beyond the beer to encompass a little more beverages. And expanding the world of beverages for beer distributors means you can carry energy drinks, you can carry water, you can carry enhanced waters and teas and kombuchas and meads and sakis and all these other things, and ciders and all these other products that kind of fit the truck and the occasion that typically was mostly malt based beers, but now is a much more robust and opens up more channels for you to talk about.
Yeah, so help me understand where this distributor lives in the logistical life cycle of how to get all of your beer to a specific, grocery store. So does the grocery store work with the wholesaler directly, the distributor directly, or do they actually just make an order with, Coors? I'll just say Coors for right now, but directly with Coors, and then somehow it gets to the distribution center, and then it gets, over to their store, or how does that all work?
Well, it's a little complicated, because there's certain channels. There are national accounts. So have you ever been to a Buffalo Wild Wings?
Yeah.
Okay. Buffalo Wild Wings is kind of a national account. So the brewer, the suppliers, the guys that are making the beer, they have national relationships with those retailers. So they may sit down at corporate headquarters for Buffalo Wild Wings. I don't know where they are. Maybe they're in Buffalo, New York. Sorry, Buffalo Wild Wings, for not knowing. Let's assume they're in Buffalo, New York, just because it's fun, even though it may be wrong. So they all sit down in Buffalo, New York at the Buffalo Wild Wings headquarters, and they all decide, all these stores, this is how they're going to look. So that's kind of a national accounts program. And those orders will flow through the distributorships, but they're decided at a very high level. Now, if you go to your corner bar, it's independently owned, and there may be a brewer rep may pass through there once a quarter, right? Hey, how you doing? Our beers are great. Order it through your distributor. So that's a lot more. That relationship is managed much more through the distributor sales rep, who's coming in and saying, hey, how's everything going? What's selling? What's not selling? They have a conversation about that very hyper local market, which is your corner bar. And then they work that out amongst themselves. And that really has very little to do with the actual brewer or importer influencing that small. Remember, there's over 600,000 retailers that sell beer in the United States. So even if you're Anheuser-Busch or you're Miller or your Coors, getting to all 600,000 is damn near impossible. You can pick a couple of big chains like your grocery stores and your Buffalo Wild Wings and your Airmarks for your stadiums, and you can have very close relationships with them and figure out what you're going to sell and how you're going to sell it. And then all those orders flow through the distributorships. But once you get down into the small independent bodegas and grocery stores, where do you guys live? Where
Phoenix.
do you guys live again?
Arizona.
You're in Phoenix. So, yeah, it's not so much an indie shop, but you know that there's small little bodegas around there, little markets on the side of the road. You know, there's those beer accounts are a one-to-one relationship with the beer distributor in that market. But if you go to your Fry's,
and then
if you go to the Fry's or you go to the stadium, that's going to be a much more higher level national accounts management.
Gotcha.
Does that explain your question?
And then that makes a lot of sense. And then the distributor has, you know, all of the selections of beers that they can select from. So maybe, you know, the bodega can say, I don't want ciders anymore. I want to get more IPAs.
Exactly.
And they can select from
right.
there.
They know those local, all those little market guys know what's selling, right? Those little bodegas and those little convenience stores and those little independent restaurants and bars, you know, they know what's working for them. So they'll communicate with their distributor, say, okay, this stuff isn't selling. It's done. Bring me something else. And then that gives them the option to tailor their beer list to their local market, which is what you get when you have independent local operators in your market.
Nice. And so the NBWA actually allows you to sign up for a membership or, Can you explain a little bit more what you guys do with the distributors directly?
So we advocate for distributors, and we mainly advocate at a federal level. So we have a federal affairs team, we have a communications team, we have an industry affairs team, and we all work together to keep an eye out on how federal legislation, federal regulatory thinking is going, what policies are coming up that may influence our members. And we work to make sure everyone's aware of that and steer things in the right direction for our members.
Very cool. And I know that you had mentioned that you also provide some like driver safety training, forklift training.
So on the NBWA website, it's nbwa.org. Don't go to the National Women's Basketball Association. Go to the National Beer Wholesalers Association. You will find that we have lots of programs and services, and those include training videos that are pretty well received in amongst our members, that do everything from hand truck safety to handling a keg to doing everything logistically when it comes to moving beer around. Remember, beer is heavy. It weighs a lot when it gets in the kegs and cases and in the pallets. So whether you're moving it in a hand truck or in a forklift or you're picking up physically, you know, we have experience in all of that, and we like to share that with our members. So there's lots in that regard too.
And that makes sense. You have a combination of weight, fragility, right, for things like bottles, some temp control, right? You know, it might not have to be cold the entire time, but it can't be 100 degrees because of quality and things like that. Those are some of the things that jump out to me. What else is unique about logistics in the beer industry? Can anyone put it on a truck? Do you have to have permits? Does it matter by state? What are some of those other unique things about beer and logistics?
Okay. So once again, like I said in the beginning, beer is a regulated product. It's regulated because we've noted over thousands of years that it is very different than, let's say, potatoes and corn and rice. And, you know, it's regulated because there are potentials for harm that come out of the unregulated market of alcohol. Think prohibition and mobsters running around doing whatever they want. So we have it as in a regulated way so that we can manage it. And that, wow, I forgot your question.
What else makes it unique? Like, are there certain things like, you know, I mentioned permitting, you know, I think there's a lot that goes into it that is just different. To your point, I think I can
Yeah,
find most trucks to fill up a truck with pallets of potato chips, and I don't think I have to worry about a whole lot. But certainly in the beer space, it feels like there's much more I have to be concerned about.
absolutely. You do need a permit. You need a federal permit to move beer. You need to register with the TTB and get a wholesale alcohol beverage wholesale permit that gives you the right to move beer around. And literally, there's probably 30,000 alcohol beverage wholesale permits out there right now, and everyone's got one. I mean, the brewers have one, the distributors have one, a lot of retailers have one. If you want to be in the business of moving alcohol around, you better have a license to do it. Think of cruise ships. We could logistic companies that are moving beer for a third party. They're all going to have those products. And beer is different because it's heavy. It's perishable. Most people don't realize it's got like a 90 to 100-day shelf life. So as it moves through the system, it needs to have a certain velocity. It's not like spirits, like a bottle of whiskey. If it sits around for a while, that's okay. No one's in a hurry. You're in a hurry because when it's in a bottle format, it's not in a cash format. And even liquor, even spirits industry wants to turn their spirits into cash as quickly as possible, but they don't have a clock that's ticking. And beer has an expiration date. It has a freshness date. So you want to keep that moving because you end up having to throw it out if it goes out of code or if it's handled differently. So some beer products require refrigeration. They require temperature controlled warehouses, temperature controlled trucks, and when they get to retailer, they need to be refrigerated. So there's a little bit of freshness that you need to keep up on with the beer industry as opposed to the wine industry or the spirits industry in the alcohol beverage space. Those are all unique and different to our industry.
Yeah, those whiskey guys really figured it out because if the product just sits there for 10 years, they just put a new label on it and says 10-year-old edition and sell it for more. It's the ultimate way to handle
Exactly.
expiration. Like brilliant move, whiskey guys. But yeah, I think people forget that beer expires, right? It's so
Oh yeah.
you're not quite as crazy as produce where once that tomato comes off that vine, you might be 20 days, but certainly 90 to 100 plus weight plus temp control. Like you've really designed you have to really be thoughtful about how you're managing the logistics of this to do it effectively because of all those factors. And so, yeah, I think people forget beer expires because I think most people who buy beer are looking to intake that pretty quick. I don't think a lot of beer expires out there, just a gut feel from the people I know, but maybe I'm hanging around with the wrong people.
Well, we could talk COVID real quick because what happened in March of in March in the Great Shutdown was the on-premise industry, the on-premise bars and restaurants, taverns, stadiums was shut down, and that was in March, and that was right before St. Patrick's Day, right before March Madness, right before opening day for baseball, and what that meant was all of these bars, restaurants, and stadiums were preloaded with tons of beer. And when it got shut down and it became very clear that things weren't opening up anytime soon, the beer industry had to do something it had never done before. And that was to go to those retail accounts and bring back all of that beer.
Wow.
Now we're very one directional. We pick beer up from a supplier and we send it to a retailer. We don't want to go in reverse. We don't like putting it in the reverse and backing up. And when we had to do that, think about, you guys don't live in New York City, but if you've been to New York City, or you've been to Boston, or you've been to any of the, the older cities in America, and you go to a bar, the kegs are in the basement. And it's really easy taking a big giant 15-gallon keg and lowering it down with gravity. It is a royal pain in the butt to lift it up out of that basement. And that's what beer distributors had to do, which was they had to go and grab all this beer. And then they had all this beer, and then they had to turn it into hand sanitizer or get rid of it. And so it was very interesting for us. But the industry is we like to move forward and have that beer move forward. Pulling it back was a huge challenge for us in COVID, and it took a lot of work. And that while a lot of people were at home, beer distributors were out there as essential employees working to clean out on-premise accounts, those bars, those taverns, those stadiums, and help those guys recover some money that they had spent on building inventory. Good stuff.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think, a lot of people forget about that shift. I know we're coming up on about half an hour here. Calissa, any final thoughts or questions for Lester while we have him?
Yeah, so I was looking at the MBWA website, and it also mentions just training about like human trafficking and other things like that. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. Do you want to touch on that real quick?
Yeah, so we, I don't know how long it's been. I guess it's a little bit more than a year now. It's been over a year, and we noticed, a while ago, we noticed that there was a lot of effort going in within other industries about human trafficking and what you can do to to help prevent it and minimize it and take action against it. I mean, anyone who's been through an airport has seen the posters that have been up there for a very long time. But it made sense for the American for the National Beer Wholesalers Association, its members, to help train. I mean, we're not giving people guns and badges and they're going out there. What they're doing is they're just learning how to identify the signs of human trafficking and how someone may behave if they're in that circumstance, whether it's in regardless of why they're there and how they got in that position, help giving our guys who are in over 600,000 retail accounts, from stadiums to little bodegas to gas stations to convenience stores, you name it, we're there. And, having our guys just key in a little bit and, hey, that looks suspicious, call the hotline and report it. And if you save one life, that's all that matters, right? And if you rescue one person out of that crappy situation, I think that's all that matters. And that's what I think we're doing. And it's been a good program, and we've helped train thousands of beer distributors in how to pick up and recognize instances of human trafficking, and we think it's a great program.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
I think it's awesome though, because it's terrible that something like that happens, but then the fact that you can empower, hundreds of thousands of drivers who are in these places, boots on the ground, the observation of like, hey, when you see something, like, empower people to help solve that problem.
Oh yeah, it's a big deal, and it's important, and I'm super proud that we engaged in that and did those efforts, because it does mean a lot for the people that it saves. I mean, you don't rescue one person, you save one person.
Yeah,
bang, that's all that matters.
Makes it all worth it. So closing out on that, Lester, what are any pitches? How do people find you? How do people find the MBWA? How do they not confuse it with the WNBA? What do you want to tell them?
So yeah, if you're interested in the MBWA, check out our website. We have a convention coming up here in October, beginning of October. It's going to be in Chicago. It's our annual convention. It's going to be a lot of fun. We have a product showcase where people get to come and look at all the great things that beer distributors purchase from their suppliers, from their primary suppliers that sell them trucks and hand trucks and forklifts and racks and all that great stuff that you need to make a beer distributorship successful and profitable. So that's certainly a ton of fun. And we have seminars, and we have some good speakers that are going to be up there. So if you'd like to attend, or you're interested in beer distribution, by all means, reach out on the website, and we'll get you involved in that. We have a leadership conference that comes up in November, which is super fun as well. We started it as a next gen program, but it's slowly morphed into a leadership conference. So kind of those next geners after a while actually started being the generation. So we changed the name to leadership. And so it's a leadership conference, but that's super fun as well. And we expect to have a lot of people come for that. And I think that's going to be in Colorado in November. So we got lots of programs going on. We have a sustainability calculator that we introduced this year for the logistics space, for beer distributors in particular, that gives them all the details that they can do. They can log on to they can go onto this calculator. They can enter everything about their costs and their fleet and their current circumstances for how their operations run. It tells them how much what their carbon footprint is, and then it gives them tools to help reduce it. So you could actually say, hey, at the start of the year, I did X amount of carbon. At the end of the year, I did Y, and this is how I did it. And it gives you this great little, and we don't see it as greenwashing. We see it as, making yourself as a business more profitable, more efficient, and more climate friendly. So it's good stuff.
That's awesome. So
I could go on and on and on, but I think we've had enough good fun. We could dive into more specifics of the industry and of the alcohol beverage industry maybe in another podcast.
Yeah, Lester, I think we're gonna have you on board. I got a ton of beer questions that are probably a lot more beer than logistics, but I've got a lot of questions around that.
Of course.
It's just talking about beer, wine, and spirits, who drinks it, where they drink it, when they drink it. The evolution of it is an hour discussion. I can sit down and talk for an hour just about how we went from beer to wine to spirits, how it goes through the demographics. It's nothing to do with logistics, everything to do with how people and why people drink beer. But I certainly enjoy talking the logistics aspects of the industry with you guys, and look forward to doing it again.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So yeah, if you want to find more information around Lester, you can find him on LinkedIn, of course, Lester Jones, but mbwa.org is where you want to go. Not to be confused with my organization, MBDA, National Beer Drinkers Association. We wholesale nothing, we just consume it. We're a lot less sophisticated. So thanks for your time, and I look forward to talking to you soon.